Food is one of our daily necessities, but when it becomes waste, it comes with a financial, environmental, and ethical cost. In today's episode, we'll be focusing on how food waste could be one of the major things stopping us from becoming circular. Globally, about 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted each year. To understand more about food waste, let's take an example of the simplest form of the food chain. We have food farming and harvest, production and packaging, distribution to retail stores, customer consumption, and finally, throwing away the leftovers. There is also transport involved in between each stage to bring materials from one stage to another. If we analyze this chain closely, we can correctly assume the waste is generated from each process unit here. This means food is currently being produced in a linear system that makes a large portion of it being thrown away along the supply chain. But why are we wasting food in its case in the first place? Let's look into it. During the farming and harvesting, some crops are affected by bad weather, insufficient nutrients, and the use of chemical fertilizers, which also means some non-perfect food ends up going to the landfill before even making it to the sorting out facilities. In many developing countries, the limited state-of-the-art harvesting technologies also result in damaged production that leads to the majority of it to the landfill. However, sometimes even with the best technologies, we can't use 100% of the crop or grain to make the desired product. Let's take an example of coffee. Coffee comes from coffee cherry, from which the outer pulp is thrown away and the bean is dried and proceeded forward. This means 98% of coffee cherries are wasted and only 2% of it is transformed into the coffee itself. Before the production or manufacturing stage, the harvested crops are sorted out, during which imperfect crops are thrown away. Once they go to the production stage, foods are separated based on their conditions because the food being exported to other countries and other places have to meet certain standards before being accepted. For example, USDA assigns grades to many fruits and vegetables based on their size, shape, texture, and ripeness. About 50% of the food is lost at the production stage alone. In the later stage of the value chain that consists of distributors, retailers, and the use, the customer habits control the outcome. Customers often seem to make good compromises on cost and quality before buying the products. If the two sellers are selling the same quality of food and one is offering a lower price, the customers obviously come to buy the cheaper one. This results in the expensive vendors being forced to contribute more to the food waste. Many supermarkets and vendors offer buy one get one free deals, which encourage customers to take more than they need. Later on, they end up throwing away the free product which they never wanted in the first place. On the other hand, supermarkets make strict regulations on stocking odd-looking but perfectly edible food, mostly influenced by customer behavior and government guidelines. When it comes to using at home, it's not uncommon to cook more than we need, which results mostly in throwing away the leftovers. In restaurants, many of them offer all-you-can-eat buffet, which encourages people to put on the plate more than they can eat. And if the customers are not being responsible, they contribute to wasting the leftovers without spending a single penny more. Another huge drive of waste accumulation is due to distinctive competition in the supply chain. More choices means higher competition. Let's take an example of a supermarket again. We have probably seen many fully stocked shelves with varieties of choices of one product. It comes down to human nature that they choose mainly based on cost, brand, and taste. Customers want a lot of options and the retailers have to meet their demand. And unfortunately, more choices mean more waste. Now let's look at the environmental impact of food waste. When we are wasting food, it's not just food that's being wasted. Think about all the resources required to bring food from farm to our tables, such as water for irrigation, land for planting, fuel for powering harvest, fertilizers for crop farming, and vehicles for transportation. The use of water for agricultural processes involves a huge stake as just one apple requires an average of 125 liters of water. According to the World Bank, 70% of fresh water is used for agricultural purposes, including crop irrigation and drinking water for livestock. When it comes to meat, 15,400 liters of water is required for just 1 kilo of beef. In terms of land, about 28% of the world's agricultural area is used to produce food that's eventually wasted or lost each year. The use of land for food production is also the main cause of deforestation worldwide. This is expected to increase more as the population growth is expected to reach 9.8 billion by 2050. An increase in population means an increase in food production, and hence an increase in food waste, and subsequently an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. The FAO estimates 3.3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent carbon footprint per year. Now, let's look at the transport sector. Only in 2019, the transport sector was responsible for 24% of worldwide CO2 emissions, which is the largest share of the greenhouse gas emission. Even though it's not directly related to food waste, we also have to check the environmental impact from transport, as it's responsible for transporting food from one place to another. Also, if the food doesn't reach the designated place in the given time, it might become inedible, which eventually means creating more food waste. What can we do? Let's look at some practices we can adopt to eliminate or minimize food waste. Avoid linear production. When it comes to using the principles of the circular economy, it always means we have to avoid linear production. We have to look for innovative ways to transform used food or part of the food chain into new products. For example, let's look at our coffee beans again. We can use the cherry pulp as a fertilizer or make any other products. Unsustainable practices. The best way to avoid unsustainable practices is by providing better training for farmers and the right mindset for the public. Improved technologies that require fewer energies to feed the vehicles can have a significant positive impact. An even more efficient approach would be to make the most of the food through clear transparency between the farmers, distributors, and the customers. We can establish more efficient communications with the farmers to reduce overproduction. On the other hand, distributors and customers can help by reducing the waste as much as possible. The leftover food can be redirected towards nature and put in the other systems where it can be made into other products. Food is grown regeneratively and locally. Customers can try to buy locally whenever or wherever possible because shorter supply chain means fewer opportunities for loss. At home and restaurants, customers can improve their meal planning and only throw away food when it's truly inedible. Once thrown away, composting is another option which diverts food waste from landfill. Promote plant-based foods. It's no-brainer that meats generate higher emission and are more energy-intensive than plants. So alternatively, we can promote plant-based foods or minimize the use of meat as much as possible. One great example of an innovative solution is plant-based burgers, which are already in the business and taste like real meat. Now let's conclude. To promote a circular food system, we need proper planning in the food chain system. It's better to have food supply chain shorter and more sustainable. This way, it makes the system manageable, especially if the system is advanced enough to save the demand in cities. A transparent approach can be a good start where the customers can know where and how the food is produced, and the farmers can know where and how much it is consumed. Utilizing the byproducts of the food production should be prioritized to achieve a circular food system. We need a solution that does not require high energy and can be regenerative. Turning restaurant scraps into bioplastics and home food waste into biogas can be a good option to produce household energy. How can government help in this case? They can help by introducing a stricter policy to encourage all the stakeholders involved in the food chain to make a more regenerative and circular approach, thus eliminating linear food systems. That's all in today's video. See you in the next one.